Welcome back. You're watching Morning Express, and specifically, it is time for the newsroom discussion where we talk about the issues affecting the media industry. And of course, before we went on the break, Patrick, you wanted to say something. Maybe you can just pick it up from there.
Okay. I was saying we've got to think about the architecture we've set in place that protects journalists. I mean, the Constitution does say that they've got this right to report, without intimidation and stuff, and actually stops the state. But is there an architecture to actually effect that? So that if people are arresting journalists, policemen are abusing their powers to intimidate journalists, or as we saw in the case of Wanga, this guy is calling to whatever to threaten by him. Are there any consequences for that? Unfortunately, the architecture you have really works the other way around. We've got a media council that sees its duty more to regulate journalists rather than protect them. And I think that for as long as we are structured in that sense, where it is almost about protecting society from journalists rather than protecting journalists from the state, then we will always be in the situation where we are allowing violations to happen. And this has been happening for a very, very long time, especially with the cases of journalists being simply arrested for harassment purposes. We saw it happening with bloggers before and stuff.
All right.
And the second thing I would say is that at the bedrock, the media is reliant on the public to stand up for it. But it has not always stood up for the public. We saw it last year with PDU ads it was running that were patently illegal. It was kowtowing into the state just to get the advertising shilling.
Yes.
And people see this, and they see this is not a media that, even though we've created the space for it, that is working in our interest. And that means that when the state does eventually come after the media, as it has always done, as it will always continue to do, the media doesn't have the fallback of going back to the public and saying, look, protect us. Because the public can already see, you have not been working in our interest. You have always kowtowed to the state. So I think the media has to do quite a lot of introspection to ask how it recovers its credibility from the public, how it gets to a position where it is seen as the voice of the public, and the public will then defend it.
All right. We were talking about how Wanga was accused of unethical journalism. William, let me come to you. There's a chain when it comes to journalism. Before an article, before a report is out there, the story needs to go from the reporter to the sub-editor to the editor before it airing or being published. So why not blame the entire chain?
We've just said it. The problem is the issue of people having connections within the media houses. Because this is a journalist who just gathers the story and files it. This story goes through the media, the news desk. From there it goes to the sub-editors, and there are many things. Even the legal department is involved before a story is published. Yes. So this is a case where the media house or the editors surrender the journalists to the persecutor.
I think the issue there was that probably the person who is known out there is the person who has the byline. Whoever has the byline of that story. And in this case, Wanga's name was there. So it's very easy for somebody to go for him. And that is actually what happened when you went for him, because the story had his byline. So that is why there is an elaborate process of raising complaints in such cases. So when you raise complaints and you follow the proper channel, then we can now go to the entire chain. You're talking about who probably wrote the story. Yes, Wanga will say that, yes, I defend this story. This is what I wrote. Or this story was probably altered by my editors, and therefore I'm not responsible for the final version of the story. This is the raw copy that I submitted to my editors, and this is the final copy. And therefore you can see where the variation is, then you can able to pinpoint who did this. But in this case, this guy was doing it in a barbaric way, that I'm going for this person because the story has his byline. But if he bothered to complain to the media house that I'm not comfortable with this story because it's not accurate, it's not objective, this story, the facts in this story have been fabricated by this journalist, and therefore we seek redress, then it's now upon the media house now to start its own investigation and find out what happened. Wanga, are you responsible for all for what is in the story, then one can say, yes, I'm responsible for, and therefore I'm ready to defend it. Or this guy or the office of the deputy president could have written to the media council and take the matter to the complaints commission. There then also adjudication will take place whereby the commissioners will interrogate all the facts that are involved. Then they'll able now to say that, okay, in this case, all the people who are involved in the production chain then are responsible for the mess or whatever in the story. But this guy went for the shortcut, fixing and intimidating journalists, probably, which is his best way of doing things.
Okay, Jen, you know, before a journalist writes an article or a story, of course, you have your own sources. But then the issue of sources has been questioned several times. Journalists are being asked to disclose their sources. Should we?
No.
No.
Never. I mean, that issue has come up. I remember when I worked here at the Standard, and one Evelyn Kwampoka was being threatened to name a source. She was even being threatened to be taken to court. So, and even once in the US, a CNN reporter was being asked to name a source. You see, journalists have to build trust with sources of information. The minute you betray a source of information, then you're done. Where are you going to get your information from? So you cannot force a journalist to declare or to give you or to name their source, because the work that we do as journalists is maybe even within the Witness Protection Act, where you protect that person who has given you the information. So you cannot name a source. I mean, it's totally wrong, I think. I mean, I wouldn't even ask somebody to tell me who the source is. You see, when you want to make your name as a reporter, because these are the people who do stories, leave alone the editors, because the editors are on the desk. The reporter is the one who goes out to get that story. That reporter has been tipped by somebody with information, and that information is crucial. And that information is important, like Eric and Gadara have said, it's for the public consumption. Kenyans need to know. Let's say it's a story around corruption. And you've been told, for example, Jane Godia took these billions of shillings to her account. I mean, the person who has given you that information, you must protect them. It is key for you to build trust. I mean, if you do not have trust with your sources of information, then you'll never have stories. Nobody's going to talk to you.
Does anyone deny that, or you all accept her sentiments? Patrick?
I don't think you're going to get anybody here who thinks that journalists should be compelled to reveal their sources. But there's one thing I think I'll say that it's sort of tangentially connected to this. We've seen quite a lot of discomfort amongst many people with journalists using anonymous sources. And I think that speaks not so much to whether or not they should use them, but to whether or not the journalists are believable when they say this. And I think the real challenge for most of us in the press and in the newsroom is to build up our reservoir of credibility. I think that is very much a function of the newspaper itself, in how they decide what goes on, in how they ensure and they can assure the public that the right checks have been covered through. Across the world, many newspapers, all of them, use anonymous sources. You know, and the fact is, for a lot of them, they have built up, especially the really large and really newspapers of record, something like the New York Times, etc. They have built up that reservoir of credibility. So when they say something, you know, they can tell you, we've got an anonymous source that said this, you believe them, you know. Unfortunately for us, our media keeps wavering between whether they are believable or not. We see planted stories at times, you know, other times they're doing some good reporting, you know. So until they become consistent in actually doing, you know, protecting their own brands, protecting their own names and building up that credibility, then is when this, once they do that, is when this whole discomfort with anonymous sources will disappear.
William, you look like you want to say something.
Yeah. This issue of our source you know, what matters most is that as the journalists have facts.
Okay.
If you're writing a story, it's an investigative story, do you have facts? And these are facts that can be verified. So if you doubt my facts and you say otherwise, bring something that says the opposite of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Gadara has just said it. We need to build credibility. And I think credibility is about having facts. If there's a scandal, let's say there's something in Kenya Power where we're talking of 10.1 billion.
Yes.
And the bills are backdated. As a journalist, make sure you have facts. You have documents to back it up.
All right. So what if, yes, you have the facts, you have sources, but you cannot, one, publish the facts, you cannot name your sources. And most of the times, this leads to the media being told they're speculating, they have fake news. I mean, we've been called Githeri media up and about Eric.
But I think there is probably just a way how some of our politicians operate. And I can tell you that most people who complain about some of these stories and facts, they end up being the sources of those stories. And actually, that's what I've established.
Okay.
That you'll be given these stories by the same people in these offices. Then they'll be the first people to come out and dispute that. If anybody is disputing the story that was written by Wanga, he's now almost, we're going to the second month ever since President Uhuru was inaugurated for the second term.
Yes.
Up to date, we still don't have a cabinet.
Yeah.
Then how are you going to doubt that story? Because what we expected probably to happen for them to disapprove that was the following day to tell us that here's the cabinet, and so that we do not believe the story. But right now, as things stand, we still believe that story because it's
I would say one thing. That, one thing to understand is in lots of reporting, lots of times, the facts are contested. Yeah. So to give you an example from the US, there's this talk now of Donald Trump's use of the word shithole. And the question is, did he actually utter it? He says he didn't. Other people who were in the meeting say he did. So the fact is contested. And the thing is, for the journalists, I think, to be clear, to get obviously multiple sources for a particular story, but also himself, he has to be believable when he tells you that, somebody has told me he actually said this, And that's why I keep talking, it's about the credibility of the journalist and of the newspaper at the end. It is them doing the reporting, and it's with them whether you actually believe what they tell you or not.
Yes.
When they say we have a fact, we have this document, we have this, you have to believe that they've got it, or you can say, well, they've been lying to us before and stuff, so perhaps they don't have it.
Yeah, but if you also
and
look
I
at...
think that's a crux of it. Build your credibility, all of these issues will disappear.
If you also look at just what Gadara is saying, if you also look at definition of news, is that something that no one wants to be known?
Yeah.
So exactly. So if you are a media, and I said this when I saw a county commissioner, regional commissioner, Nelson Marwa in Mombasa, pleasing the media, that the government is very happy with the work of the media. I was a worried man. I always want the media, actually, if the media is there and everybody is accusing it of telling a story, then that's not the media is doing its work.
Yes.
Like this case where the office of the deputy president was complaining about a newspaper, that means that the media is doing its work. But had it been that Mugonye came out there to start telling the public that, but they Wanga agree that's a very good story, then there's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with that. But if you see that friction between the media and the state, then that means that the media is doing its work.
All right. Jen, let me come to you. Apart from the media doing its work, the media has been accused of doing PR journalism. For example, the Observer newsletter that is usually sent to the newsrooms, to just give an analysis on the media industry in general. They quoted one incident just the other day by a certain publication that, when NTSA was thrown out of the road, when they were recalled, and then the traffic police, came back. The next day, the publication, instead of saying, okay, fine, the traffic police is not for corruption, they stated that they were early in the morning, they had been, there, ready to do their work with all the roadblocks and all that. What do you have to say about this?
You've brought in so many issues. But one, PR journalism comes from what Eric had said, the issue of advertising. When somebody is giving you their money, they believe that you owe them. Whether it's the state, whether it's government, whether it's corporations,
yes,
or these big companies, they believe you owe them. And that is when PR journalism comes in.
Yes.
And when you do PR journalism, you can only say good things. You cannot say bad things. And I've seen media houses suffer where when they have said the truth about a company or an organization that gives them a lot of money, they are blacklisted. Mm-hmm. Then they are denied the advertising revenue simply because they were not able to do the PR journalism. The issue of NTSA and police, I think this is just a confusion, because when you speak about NTSA, you speak about traffic police, you speak about the kanjos in the streets, you know, it's just a whole lot of confusion.
Yes.
That even if I was to do a story around it, I wouldn't know what to say.
Okay.
One time I pass a policeman on Uhuru Highway roundabout. Before I get to Teleposta, there's a kanjo.
Okay.
Now, between these two, then somewhere along the highway, there's an NTSA. Now, who are we answerable to in terms of traffic?
But
it's
even
just a
how
whole
it's
lot of confusion. Yes.
How it's reported, and I think that's what's also the crux of the question. I think there is no real discussion of what the issues are, especially on things like on the road. Mm-hmm. We are told the policemen came back as if they were never there.
Yes.
They were always on the roads. You know, they were always extorting. So it's not like they came back. You know, and what does that actually solve, removing NTSA? Again, these are questions that are not asked. It is constantly repeated as if anything government does, oh, this is a new era on the road, it's going to change things.
Yes.
So there's no real interrogation of those. I think, for me, one of the biggest and the most egregious examples of PR journalism, as you're calling it, is when the newspapers ran what is essentially a press release from the president's, PSCU unit, you know, about what the presidency has been doing. Mm. That is a press release. It's the presidency reporting on itself. And our media runs it as news.
The way it is.
The way it is, yes, as it comes. Even right there by PSU. Mm. You know, that is wrong. You know, should take it, all right, this is what they are saying. What else? What else are you hearing? You know, and stuff. So when you write a story, it is one that interrogates things, not just simply that regurgitates what government is doing. It's what we are doing on the road stories, what we do with PSU. It's why we never see a negative story about companies like Safaricom. Okay. You know, because everybody's so afraid of losing the revenue. I'll say one last thing. It used to be the case that corporations chased newspapers to put ads in newspapers because newspapers had the audience. Now it's the other way around. The newspapers have lost their audience, and now they're running after corporations to get advertising. Yes. You know, and that's the situation they've put themselves in. The way they lost their audience is they stopped being credible. They stopped being people that, you know, putting out products that people will actually spend money on to go and buy. You're not going to buy crap news and a crappy newspaper. You're not going to spend your 50 shillings to do that, or 100 shillings. You know, but if they actually invested in the quality of their product, then people would want to buy it, they would get their audience back, and then they wouldn't be the ones chasing the corporates would be chasing them.
All right, so then how do we curb these issues even as we conclude or wind up in these issues? Eric?
I think what we have, if you look at the model that we're using in this country, it shows that we still have a gap, that probably that can still be filled. We still do not have because we don't have what we have businesses. Yes. So we still need a media that can be trusted for doing public work. So like we've seen in other countries, for example, in the UK, where we have got The Guardian, that actually is not interested in advertising, not interested in revenue from advertising. So what it does, it appeals to the public, it appeals to the reader that if you want us to continue doing a good job, please support the cause. And I think that's probably where I also look into in Kenya, that can we also have a media, a newspaper, or a television station, or a radio station that can be supported by the public and those and well-wishers who still believe in good journalism, so that we can always use that as a platform to address some of these issues that are not influenced by the business decisions that are being made. Because by the end of the day, If you look at the model we are using, like I said, by the end of the day, these businesses have to have a financial statement at the end of the year, and they want to make profits. The shareholders are waiting for their shares, or for their dividends. So what we need is that we must also have a media that can do the public work, that is supported for doing the public work.
Okay, William.
Yeah, I still come back to the issue of PR. And I feel the media houses should always interrogate. Like, let's say when you get a press release from the presidential communication. To me, we should not run it as a story. Okay. Let it run as an advert, if anything. But we should interrogate it. Does it have facts? We should run something parallel to it and tell the public, this is what the presidency is saying, but these are the facts that we have in the public. Okay. I think that way we'll be able to separate, tell the truth to the public, because our main duties is to tell the truth, not convey messages from people who want to do image.
Okay. Yeah. Jen, how do we cover all these issues?
I think we just need to move away from he said, she said, and get to analytical journalism.
All right.
Analytical journalism should actually form the bedrock of how our information gets there. Once we get into analytical journalism and also build proper interviewing skills for journalists who go out there. Because when a journalist goes out to get a story and they are doing an interview, they should be able to get a story out of the answers, not just you ask a question, you're replied, and you don't follow up with another question. So building up on analytical journalism and interviewing skills for our reporters will help. But also in the media houses, looking at the chain of command, most newsrooms now don't have that institutional memory because we have very young editors, we have people who don't even understand how things work, the history, the background, and quality assurance to be able to check, to keep a check on things before they get out, so that we don't have to call that reporter and threaten that reporter because his or her name is in the story. Who does the quality check before the product goes out?
All right.
That must be
just one last thing.
Yes.
When Eric speaks of the public supporting our publications, we've got to remember we already have this. We've got a publicly funded TV station, a publicly funded radio stations under the KBC. KBC is not the voice of government. It should be the voice of the people. And we all fund it. And we need to have, within the context of these discussions, also a discussion of the role of our public broadcaster, which should be independent of government. It is set up to be. And that should be a platform for putting out the sorts of stories, that you would find, for example, on BBC, etc. That is our BBC, it's our KBC, and that we need to be insisting that it is held to account for the sorts of coverage that it gives, because it does get public funding to do that.
All right, thank you very much. To my immediate left, Jen Godia, who is a media and communication expert, and next to her is William Ouma, who is the Director of Journalism for Human Rights International. Next to him is Eric Odwar from the Secretary General Kenya Union for Journalists. And last but not least is Patrick Kadara, who is a journalist. Thank you very much for making time to join us here on Morning Express. Always a pleasure having you. So we are taking a break here on KTN News on Morning Express. We will be coming back on KTN News. But for our viewers on KTN Home, we bid you goodbye. My name is Ashley Mazuri. Life and Style comes up next.